Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. We are in a turbulent time in America's democracy, but it is very clear that one of the things we need to do to ensure that our country stays on its historic constitutional mission of greater equality and greater justice with every generation is to ensure that every American that wants to vote can register and can vote.
Yay! Yay!
Ladies and gentlemen, to me, the right to vote is the most essential right we have as Americans. It is the right that enables you to protect every other right. And I'm proud to be joined by colleagues here in government and in good government groups, in unions and other activists who have worked hard on these causes for years. I think this is the year we really can get something done. We are joined today, among others, by Senate Democratic Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Senator Jose Peralta, Senator Brad Hoylman, Assembly members Robert Carroll and Dan Quart, Council member Donovan Richards. I'm sure if I've left anyone else, they will yell. Adonis. Oh, Adonis. Assembleísta y primo, Adonis Rivera. And representatives from some of the state's leading advocacy organizations who have been working for voting rights for years. The New York Civil Liberties Union, Common Cause, the Brennan Center for Justice, Citizen Action, the Working Families Project, the New York Progressive Action Network, okay, the League of Women Voters, the New York Democratic Lawyers Council, which I'm very proud of, Get Organized Brooklyn, my former client NYPIRG, the Campaign Finance Board, Demos, and friends from DC 37, including Jamila Joseph, and 32BG SEIU, including Secretary Treasurer Kyle Bragg. Thank you all for being here. So, ladies and gentlemen, in many ways, the United States of America began on this spot. The nation's first capital was here. The first U.S. Congress convened here. And George Washington was inaugurated here. For those of you who are fans of excellent musical theater, Alexander Hamilton is buried right over there. But none of those are Federal Hall's most important accomplishments to American history. It was in Federal Hall that the Bill of Rights was first introduced, ushering in a nation built on rights, on laws, and on democratic participation. The quintessential American ideals of democracy and equal justice under law were born here. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, all across America, those very ideals are being undermined. States all across the country have been putting up barriers to voting at a pace unprecedented in modern history. With the new administration in Washington, it's even possible we'll see new attempts to erect similar barriers at the federal level. Democracy itself is under attack.
Yes.
Now, that is unconscionable, and it is un-American. It is up to us in New York to take up the challenge that the founders posed here more than 2 centuries ago and lead the way in pushing back on these anti-democratic efforts. New York has long been a bastion of democracy and has been a leader in many progressive causes. But our state's current system of registration and voting is an affront to that legacy. Voting, as I say, is the right that enables you to protect all your other rights. And yet here in New York, we make voting much, much harder than it needs to be, and much, much harder than in virtually any other state in the country. Our state's embarrassingly outdated voting systems have silenced the voices of far too many New Yorkers. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, New York has the 5th worst registration rate in the country, and when it comes to actual voting, we have the 3rd worst voter participation rate in the nation. Think about that. There are only 2 other states that have a worse rate of voter participation, when you consider everyone eligible to vote, than the great state of New York. That is shameful, and that is something we are setting out here starting today to end forever. Now, in December, I issued a report examining the problems New Yorkers had at the polls in last year's elections. I think last year's elections brought into graphic relief the problems we face in registration and voting in New York. Voters faced long lines, bureaucratic snafus, broken scanners, missing names on voter rolls, outdated registration rules, and more. Simply put, New York's voting system is broken. And I hope everyone here is as committed to fixing it as I am today.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a complex philosophical argument. I have a simple principle. Any law that makes it easier to register to vote is a good law. Any law that makes it harder to register and vote is a bad law. There are states all over America that are passing bad laws, voter suppression laws. According to the Brennan Center, 14 states passed voter suppression laws just between the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections. But it is clear that here in New York, we're not leading by example as we should be. The legislation I'm proposing today would make us an exemplar for the country. We have far too many laws that make it harder for people to register and vote. To live up to our state's democratic tradition, we're going to have to take the lead in showing a different path forward and expand voting rights all across our state. And that is why I'm here to formally introduce a comprehensive new reform package, the New York Vote Act. And this act will go a long way towards making New York a national leader on voting rights as we should be. This reform package will make New York a healthier democracy by boosting registration and turnout across the state, and will provide a model for other states looking to take a stand for democracy in these times when democracy is being challenged as never before. The reforms cover two main areas. First, we make it easier for people to register to vote. Second, we make the actual voting process itself easier, more efficient, and more inclusive. So let's look at registration first. The biggest reform is that we have to make voter registration automatic as they have in many other states. Basically, any formal contact a person has with a state or local agency will be presumed to be an application to register to vote and will be automatically forwarded to the Board of Elections unless that person specifically opts out. Oregon passed an automatic voter registration law just in the last year, and they have since seen registration rates quadruple. We can do no less. We need that kind of democratic infusion. My reform package also allows New Yorkers to register and vote on the same day. If someone is motivated to have their voice heard at the polls, we should not allow bureaucratic deadlines to stand in their way. And the votes don't count until that voter's eligibility to vote is verified. So we really need to make it easier for people to vote in both of those ways, but we also need to take the registration process out of the 1980s and create an online registrative portal. It is now technically possible to register online through the Department of Motor Vehicles, or DMV, but it is not really a robust or useful option for many, many New Yorkers. Under my bill, New York would also end the counterproductive policy of canceling a voter's registration just because they moved to a new county. This is something that was a part of the major purge of voters in Brooklyn that we have now filed a lawsuit about. But if you move from Staten Island to Westchester under current law, your registration is canceled. That makes no sense, and my bill would end that practice and have the Board of Elections at a voter's new address work with the voter to make the appropriate changes on their registration. And finally, we'll dramatically shorten the deadline for changing your party affiliation to allow more people to take part in our primaries. To participate in the April 19th, 2016 presidential primary, voters had to enroll as a Democrat or Republican by October 9th, 2015, 193 days before the primary. That's by far the earliest deadline in the country, and it's even months before New York's deadline for presidential candidates to even file to be on the ballot. So, second, my act would also bring voting into the modern era. First, our reforms will finally bring early voting to New York. Many states have early voting, It is not something that produces problems. Indeed, it produces tremendous benefits. It makes it easier for working people to vote. It cuts down on long lines on election day. And similarly, we need to stop requiring an excuse for absentee voting. We propose voting by mail that can make it easier for you to participate in the democratic process. And if it makes it easier, by all means, you should be able to vote by mail. Some of the challenges that voters face require simple fixes like this that have all been tried successfully in other states. There is nothing in here that is not something that has been proven to be workable, successful, and to increase voter participation. Now, some of the challenges that voters face are more bureaucratic in nature, but still need to be fixed. For example, your voting experience can vary dramatically depending on where in the state of New York you live. In some counties, polls don't open till noon on election day. In others, poll workers receive virtually no training. Every New York voter deserves an equal and equally hassle-free voting experience, and my reform package would standardize poll hours and strengthen poll worker training all across the state. Finally, one of the problems we have in New York, and unfortunately we stand out among other states in this, is that we're actually called upon to vote too often. Just last year, there were 4 separate elections: an April presidential primary, a June congressional primary, a September state primary, and the general election in November. This is a recipe for confusion and low voter turnout. Consolidating elections is the right thing to do, but it would also save taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, which then we can use to train poll workers, expand poll hours, and implement these other reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no right more important than the right to vote. As we stand here in front of Federal Hall, we have to recommit ourselves to the founders' vision of a nation governed by its people. But if you can't vote, you can't govern. Let us reaffirm the American commitment to government by the people, and it is time once again for New York to take the lead in promoting truly American democracy in any way that we can. The reforms I've outlined today will go a long way towards that goal. I thank you for being here with me, and I thank you for your commitment to getting these reforms passed this year. Ladies and gentlemen, people are upset about what happened last year. A lot of people who really weren't paying that much attention were shocked by the long lines, by the confusion, by the wrongful purging of voters. It's time to move on this to make us a truly democratic state. I thank you for being with me, and now I want to introduce a great partner in this effort, Senate Democratic Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
Good morning, everyone. Is this not an incredible day to reinforce our democracy? Is this not a time where we are all awakened to the fact, the very basic fact, that elections have consequences?
Yes.
And are we not the most fortunate to have an Attorney General like Eric Schneiderman? He used to be part of the Senate Democrats back in the day. And he was a fighter then. And the fact that he's moved on to be one of the premier voices for democracy in this country, a leader, is really a credit to all of us in New York for being able to make sure that someone like our Attorney General is in a spotlight and able to bring some light and some understanding to some of our basic issues facing the erosion of our democracy. Now, I'm joined here with Senator Brad Hoylman, and I want to obviously welcome and thank all of our participants, but we have a job to do. 2 million eligible voters right here in New York did not bother to vote. Countless others did not bother to register. And here we are looking at who knows how long of issues and policies that basically look like they're going to undermine our democracy. What do? We do what our Attorney General has said we ought to do. Pass election reforms that make it easier for New Yorkers to vote. We need to pass reforms that set the model for the nation. Now, the Senate Democrats introduced a package earlier this week where we talked about what we would do. The Attorney General has taken that, expanded it, and I won't even say taken it. I mean, we're on the same page. He's expanded it. Early voting is a bill that I've carried for years. Can't get it passed in the Republican Senate. Combining election dates, can't get it passed. This is now a matter of we can no longer decide that we can wait. We see what is happening when we don't vote or when eligible voters are discouraged from voting. So this is our marching orders. These are our days of awakening, and this is a time for people to understand that the very foundation of our democracy is in our hands. And if we use those hands to vote, we will at least know that we participated in this fundamental process that began right here. So let's take back our vote. Let's get it done. And I want to thank the Attorney General.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I also want to announce that we're joined today by Assemblyman Michael Blake and also by our leader of the Working Families Party in New York, Bill Lipton. Thank you for being here with us today. And now we're going to hear from someone who usually doesn't speak up because she's kind of shy, Donna Lieberman of the New York Civil Liberties Union. But Donna, would you break with tradition and speak up today?
Hey, Donna.
I like that. Thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman, for my new reputation. And for your leadership on this issue. You know, New York is indeed fortunate to have an Attorney General who is committed to protecting the right to vote.
That's right.
As the Trump regime tries to concoct a fiction of mass voter fraud to justify voter suppression laws and take away voting rights from people of color and poor people, we in New York know that we must do everything we can to promote, not suppress, civic engagement. And that means ensuring the right to vote. But New York cannot for a moment pat ourselves on the back because we would never pass laws to stop people from voting. In fact, New York's antiquated voting laws are a sin of omission because they have not kept up with the times, and in fact, they do keep people from voting. That's why the NYCLU supports Attorney General Schneiderman's comprehensive and progressive plan to reform our outdated election law and expand access to the vote for all New Yorkers. These common sense reforms will expand public participation in the most important aspect of our democratic process and thereby strengthen our democracy. You know, protecting the right to vote should not be a partisan issue. Protecting the right to vote is what democracy looks like.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
There you go.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we're going to hear from another true champion of government reform who is really a warrior in this struggle, Susan Lerner of Common Cause. Susan. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Attorney General and to everyone who is here today. As the Attorney General has pointed out, we are in a very tumultuous time. New York has a special role as the cradle of our democracy to be a fortress for our democracy, and we are so lucky to have a strong guardian of democracy like our Attorney General who has stepped up to protect our basic rights. There is a scandal with voting in this country. The scandal is that too many people are discouraged from voting. That voting is too difficult. And there's no good reason why New York should be the rump end of voting reform in our country. The cradle of our democracy has to be the strongest fortress and guardian, and therefore it's time for our election processes to enter the 21st century with the kind of common sense reforms that the Attorney General is proposing in the New York Votes Act. Not only is it good for our democracy, it's better management. It is more efficient. It is cost-saving to have early voting, to have online and automatic voter registration, to have good training for our poll workers. So our message here today to all of our legislators on both sides of the aisle is let's get it done. Let's pass the New York Votes Act and show the public what democracy looks like in New York. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you. And now we're going to bring up someone who is a great partner in this fight for justice and who represents an organization that really is without peer in advancing the fundamental American vision of equal justice under law, Chi-Sun Lee of the Brennan Center for Justice.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
The Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law is delighted to be here today. We applaud the Attorney General for proposing the New York Vote Act, a comprehensive vision not just to make the crucial changes necessary to modernize our state's outdated election systems, but also to put our state at the forefront of election administration across the country. At a time when many of us anticipate new attempts at voter suppression to strike across the nation, modernization to enable more eligible New Yorkers to vote is needed more than ever. One component of the act with potential for the biggest impact is automatic voter registration. The concept is simple. Instead of our current system where people need to go out of their way to fill out a form and submit it, the more modern system, election officials would automatically register eligible New Yorkers who interact with government offices such as the DMV. People would have the choice to opt out. Automatic registration enables greater efficiency and accuracy, and at the DMV alone, automatic registration stands to add several million more eligible New Yorkers to the voting rolls. And we know from places that have already implemented automatic registration that it works. This act would also put the state in the national lead by expanding automatic registration beyond the DMV to government providers of many kinds. This expansion would help ensure that our electorate more fully represents the diversity of New York's citizens. The Act's proposal to add early voting across the state, including on weekends, would make it significantly more convenient to vote. For some folks, this could make all the difference in whether they are able to cast a ballot at all. Among other important components, the Act would also restore the right to vote to eligible citizens on parole, giving 40,000 New Yorkers a second chance to contribute to our state, while also making it much easier to administer our elections. The Brennan Center for Justice applauds this reform. We look forward to working with Attorney General Schneiderman on this proposal. We call on all lawmakers to embrace the reforms in this act, which will go a long way toward making our elections more inclusive, fair, and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to hear from Darius Gordon of Citizen Action of New York. Darius. It's good.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Darius Gordon. I am the lead organizer for Citizen Action of New York. We are a statewide organization that fights for economic, environmental, racial, and social justice. We've made big money, getting big money out of politics and voting rights a priority. Because we know government will never be truly responsive or representative to the needs of the people unless we once and for all put the people in control of our democracy. For us, that means two big things. Number one, stopping the power and influence of wealthy donors and corporate interests by passing public financing of elections at a state level. And number two, breaking down every last barrier that to voting in New York State. I am proud to stand here today with so many leaders in our community, as well as in state government, who have been great champions on both these critical democracy issues. And we know, and they know, gaining voting rights is a struggle. The generations before us fought against all odds to gain the right to have their voices heard and their vote count. And even as we stand here today, fighting to expand voting rights here in New York, the forces that want to keep power in the hands of a few across the country are trying to silence us. And they are trying to divide us. And they are working to take our right to vote away.
We've received at our hotline thousands of complaints last year about problems with voting. We received not one verifiable complaint of voter fraud. This is a false narrative that is designed to provide cover for efforts that are underway in other states around the country to pass further voter suppression laws. But in New York, we have to lead. If we want to be a progressive leader, if we want to be the progressive capital of New York, we have to show leadership. We have to show that we can make it easier for people to register and vote, that we can have the kind of vibrant democracy that really was envisioned at the founding of the Republic. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Amy Spitalnik, who will moderate questions that start with on-topic questions, if you'll identify yourself. I'd say, work on your skepticism. It's something that makes your life less pleasant, less happy. Let me just cite to the example about the League of Women Voters. The odds against women getting the right to vote were so much steeper, and what they faced was so much more difficult than what we face today. We can do this. We can do this. There is more support among members of the legislature, I believe, on both sides of the aisle in both houses than there has ever been. But also, quite honestly, a larger portion of the New York electorate is upset with what happened last year. Last year's election was a catastrophe. That's why we conducted an investigation, and that's why we're suing the Board of Elections. So the public is ready for action on this. It also comes in the context of a national battle, where there are states seeking to paint this false picture of the problem being massive voter fraud and further suppress the vote. Voter suppression laws had a tremendous impact on the 2016 election. People know that. We have to get out there with the narrative that it is time to open up our democracy, make sure everyone can vote. And I honestly feel that the public is more ready for this, and frankly, the members of the legislature are more ready for this. This does have implications that it is going to save us money in the long run. It will require some investment in the short run. So just as an idea, maybe we should try and get it in the budget for this year. That would be a good way to get it done. I have a lot more confidence in our ability to move voting reforms to open up the process than I ever have. We've run our hotline for years. We've never had the kind of reaction from voters that we had last year. People are upset. People are angry. People are demanding change. That is the time for the activists here and for the legislators that are committed to this to take advantage of the moment. For primaries, it shortens the amount of time for you to change your party affiliation. There still is a little bit of a gap, but I think it's a mistake to say this benefits the parties. This is something that has been opposed, and people have argued that it benefits some of the entrenched incumbents in the parties. It does not benefit the parties. More people voting in your political party for your candidates helps strengthen the party. It strengthens our voice at the national level. It is good for the political parties of the state of New York. It is good for the people of the state of New York. And look, it does take courage for people to stand up for this, but the outpouring of support for this since the catastrophes of the 2016 election have really been unlike anything we've ever seen before. So I do believe we can overcome whatever entrenched opposition there is. Well, as I said, we've received thousands of complaints. Our voter hotline was ringing off the hook at the various primaries and elections we had last year. We had to bring in extra people to staff the hotline. We received not one verifiable complaint of voter fraud. So there is this picture being portrayed out there that it's easy to commit voter fraud and there are lots of people doing it. That is a false narrative. We have to push back against that. We have a major problem of voter suppression in states across the country. Requirements for new voter ID laws, closing down polling places in communities of color. This is something that is a national problem. What we're saying now is it is time for New York to lead at a time when there are elements of the federal government that are going to be less enthusiastic about enforcing fundamental laws, civil rights laws, environmental laws, voting rights laws. It is up to us at the state level to show leadership. It is up to us to model smart, progressive governance. This bill, which is the most comprehensive bill that's ever been introduced on voting and registration, is the kind of thing that we need to do at the state level to show the leadership the American people are looking for, not just in New York, but all across the country. Not at all, because it's being done in states all over the country, and these problems have not had any significant impact whatsoever. It's actually safer and more secure to register to vote electronically. There are fewer mistakes than when you use our antiquated system now, where you can register to vote, but you have to do it by paper. I mean, this is something that puts us out of line with the trend in the country and with a lot of states in the country. But it's absolutely clear. We're not asking anyone to take this on our word. We're not asking anyone to take this just because we say it's true. Look at what happened in Oregon. Look at what happened in many other states. It works. We know that there's really not a problem with massive voter fraud in this country. We know that from looking at different states over and over again. This has been documented by reports from academia and good government groups. Electronic voters actually registration is actually more secure and subject to less errors than the paper system that we use here today. Well, I believe we will. I believe we will. We've been in touch with people in the Senate, in the Assembly, in the executive branch, and I do think this is the year for change. And again, voters in every part of the state are hearing from their constituents now. This is not something that is limited to people in urban areas. This is going on in the suburbs. It's going on upstate. There are a lot of the reforms here that would help people who represent rural upstate districts where it's very hard on the current system to get to where you have to get to and this narrow window we give people to vote. So we think we can get support on both sides of the aisle in both houses. Have we done a head count? No, but we've just introduced the bill today. We do have an Assembly sponsor, Assembly member Cusick from Staten Island is going to be sponsoring it. We look forward to having a Senate sponsor very, very soon, and we look forward to a vigorous campaign to get this passed. We've spoken to his office. Yes, this provides for uniform polling hours across the state, which you think about it, it's really completely unfair to have some places where you have a longer period of time to vote than others. It provides for training of poll workers, and by consolidating elections, we would have the funds to do that. And it does, early voting has a lot of benefits. It enables more people to vote, but it also cuts down on the lines on election day, because if a lot of people can vote early, there are a lot fewer people trying to line up around the block on election day. So we think this would have a tremendous impact on election day and on making it easier for people to vote. And again, the training of the poll workers is a critical element of this. Our report that we issued in December of last year found that local boards of elections were applying the rules completely inconsistently, particularly some were not giving out affidavit ballots at all, some gave out affidavit ballots to everybody. We have to provide for consistency. We believe that this bill will enable us to do that. This doesn't change the Board of Elections, but this limits the, how shall I say this politely? This limits the potential for the Board of Elections to enact policies that are inconsistent or to fail to follow through on policies that are necessary that might screw up voting for New Yorkers. Well, I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about, but we issued a comprehensive guidance not that long after the election for any jurisdiction that wants to protect undocumented immigrants. There is no definition of sanctuary cities, and that's why we issued a detailed legal guidance explaining what the federal law requires and what state law requires. The truth of the matter is that compliance with federal requests to make local government officials, local law enforcement officers, agents of the federal government for immigration purposes, their ability is very limited. Most of that under the federal law and the Constitution is voluntary. So there are a lot of actions you can take at the local level to essentially just to prevent federal overreach and to prevent the federal government from turning local law enforcement officials and local government officials into agents of immigration and enforcement. There's a very strong argument, which as a law enforcement officer I support, that it makes us less safe. When people are afraid of the police, when they view them as agents of immigration, won't come forward to report crimes, that's a problem. I don't know what the specifics are that the mayor is proposing, but we have issued a guidance making it very clear what they can and can't do. And we have been in touch with the Corporation Council to talk about the guidance and what the parameters are. Okay, so this question is about an oral argument that was held last night at in the Ninth Circuit, the Court of Appeals out on the West Coast, and this has to do with the president's shameful order relating to immigrants and a ban on immigration and further limitations on people's ability to immigrate, and imposes a whole host of other burdensome, poorly thought through requirements. I have intervened in the case in New York opposing that. We have taken action to work with the representatives of the detainees to try and ensure justice. The strongest decision thus far was issued by the Federal District Court in Washington, and that is now on appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. That was the argument that was broadcast or streamed live last night. And yes, I heard the argument, and it is absolutely clear that the justices are focusing in on one of the most fundamental constitutional infirmities of this unlawful and anti-American executive order issued by the president, which is that it violates the Establishment Clause of the Constitution, which prohibits the government from favoring one religion over another. It is clear that the intent and the effect of this order is to discriminate against Muslims and to, in some cases, favor Christians over Muslims. The judges questioned the lawyers on both sides, both about language in the executive order itself, which indicates its purpose is to discriminate against Muslims, but also statements made by the president. I think he made a statement right at the time he issued the order that, I've taken steps to prevent radical Islamic terrorists from to keep them out. So he's identified this as being a religiously motivated order himself. Others around him have said similar things. As far as Rudy, what can I say? He was asked, how did this come about? And he said, I'll tell you how it happened. The president said, I want to have an order banning Muslim entry to the country, but I want to figure out a way to do it legally. And Rudy said, and he talked to experts, and they concocted this scheme. I'm not sure what experts he talked to, but it is very clear that the intent and the effect of this order is to discriminate against Muslims. And for those of us who remember Jews being turned back from the United States in the 1930s, trying to escape crises, the notion of shutting down a refugee program and saying when we reopen it, we're going to favor one religion over another, the notion of stopping immigration from 7 countries, the likes of which has never been done by any president before. Presidents have, in very narrowly tailored ways, stopped immigration of particular groups. Nothing like this has ever been done. But I think it's important to understand that her question is based on the fact that the judges recognize that they can look at the language in the executive order itself, which to me makes it pretty clear that it's intended to be a Muslim ban, but also look at other statements by the president and those around him about the purpose and effect of this order. We know what it is. I'm optimistic that they're going to uphold the ruling of the court in Washington. They're going to stay this order. The order itself is constitutionally offensive, but the way it was rolled out has created chaos for those of you who were around 10 days ago when people were out at Kennedy Airport, at Dulles, at other airports, trying to understand what the order was. This is something that cannot stand. And I'm very proud of the fact that within 48 hours of the order being rolled out, 17 of my colleagues, representing more than 130 million American people, attorneys general all across America, from all parts of the country, issued a joint statement that this is unconstitutional, unlawful, un-American. It will not stand. But between now and the time it's struck down in the courts, we will use every tool at our disposal to see that innocent people are not hurt by this poorly conceived order.
Yay!
I have to say that I've seen better coordination, better solidarity, and really more unified passion among New York State attorneys general across the country than I've seen at any other time. I've spoken to my colleagues. Last night I spoke to one of my colleagues. I spoke to another of my colleagues early this morning. We're in communication. Our staffs are in communication. And I think it's also something that speaks to people who are in the role of attorneys general. This is not just an assault, and you can see from the attacks on the judiciary, the criticism of the judge, this is not just an assault on our laws about immigration. This is fundamentally a challenge to the rule of law. At one point, the issue that was being argued last night was, can the president issue any order he wants, not subject to any judicial review? And one judge asked very directly, are you saying the president could issue an order that would be unreviewable by the courts to ban all Muslims? Then the lawyer for the federal government eventually started to say yes, and then eventually backed off that absurd position. This is about defending the rule of law, and there's something about that that speaks to those of us who play the role of attorneys general. We view ourselves as protectors of the people in our states, but also as guardians of the rule of law. And this is not a challenge based on whether you're liberal or conservative. This is a challenge to the role of the judiciary in our tripartite government, to the fundamental notion established here many decades ago that no one is above the law, and that the president is still subject to review by the judiciary to ensure that he is not in violation of the Constitution. Every president must live within the guidelines set down by the Founding Fathers.
That's right.
Thank you.